But so thank you guys all for being here this morning. What I'd like to do is just do some brief introductions. I'll start, and then what I'll do is I'll just kind of call out, I'll go down the participant list, and if you guys could just unmute, introduce yourselves, and just say who you're associated with. So I'm Lance Peterson. I have only been with PAG since January. Prior to that, I was 27 years with the city of Tucson. So I'm excited to be hosting the committee and look forward to working with you all. I've got with me from PAG a whole slew of people that are helping to facilitate this meeting, and I won't have them all on mic, but just thanks to Becky and Dawn and Brianne and Crystal and Jeff, and Brad. So thank you guys for helping me facilitate the meeting. And with that, Michelle, you're up first on my list. So if you could just unmute and tell us who you're with.
Sure. I'm Michelle Montadino. I am with the Pima County Department of Transportation, and I help oversee, along with Jason Boley, the pavement preservation program for the county.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. Paul, you're not next on my list, but since you're Pima County, I'll jump.
All right, I'm Paul Casertano. I'm just standing on the shoulder of giants like Michelle and others, but been with Pima County for almost a year and have some history with the regional PAG program in the past. So I know from a new perspective, there's a lot of interest in coordinating the pavement condition data acquisition. So this is great to have these conversations. Thanks.
And we're glad to have your experience on this one too, Paul. So thanks for being here. Todd, you're up next.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. Todd Kessler, City of Tucson. I'm an administrator of the Management Systems division, oversee the city's pavement management program, along with the departmental GIS and system administration teams. I've been some role or capacity with the pavement management program since I started as an engineer something years ago with the city, in varying capacities, and have the background with the ARAN and the data collection programs. So have some something to contribute to the conversations here. Thanks, everyone.
And thanks, Todd. Jeremy Moore.
Jeremy Moore with ADOT, Assistant District Engineer.
Thanks for being here, Jeremy. Jose Rodriguez.
Jose Rodriguez with the Town of Oro Valley. I'm the Engineer Division Manager, and overseeing the pavement preservation is Mark Navarro. Hello.
Great. Thanks. Jason Bahi.
Jason Bahi with the Pasquiyaki Drive, former Pima County employee for 31 years with DOT there and other departments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for being here, Jason. David, you want to introduce yourself? David is from PAG with me.
Yeah. Hi, good morning. David Mitchell. I oversee performance measures, programming and data, and bike ped programs.
Great. Thanks, David. So that will bring us to the in-kind reporting. This is my first time with this form. So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply to use for matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now.
I am. This is Jason. Sorry.
Jason?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I just wanted to point out too as well that I have a 10 o'clock meeting with PAG for their RTA next. We're doing a cost estimating update for one of my projects, so I'll have to leave at 10.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for letting us know that, Jason. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. So that will bring us to the next item on the agenda, is just the update on the previous data collection program, which the city of Tucson has basically been running. Well, in 1995, I started with the city of Tucson in the pavement management section, so for a long time. So I believe the contract was officially closed in April with the city. The van has been decommissioned and the software is gone. Everything's gone. So that program is officially over. And so what we're looking at, and that's why we're all here today, is to kind of look at our next steps on how we want to proceed as a region, to gather that information that the city of Tucson had previously provided. Todd, anything you want to add with that, or?
I won't add too much here, just so we can focus on the conversations, because you pretty much summed it up. The administration overhead of owning and maintaining regional collection via a local jurisdiction was a great experience, but the return on the investment or the value there was become problematic. ADOT started fulfilling the Federal Highway Performance Monitoring System requirements, at least the International Roughness Index and those data point items that we had historically submitted to ADOT on behalf of the region. We no longer had that. The state was fulfilling those requirements, so that need kind of went away. A lot of our jurisdictions were wanting more data on not federal roadways, i.e. local streets. They want, which we were unable to achieve. Owning and maintaining the vehicle, we had one vehicle, limited staff. If a laser would go out or any piece of hardware, we were down. No data, no throughput. It would, and then jump through the hoops to replace the equipment with PAG approvals, buy the equipment, calibrate it, daily calibration, so on and so forth. So it didn't make sense to be in the data collection business. City leadership supported that thought. We worked with PAG to exit and added Lance. I think that's why we're here now, is to look at what other options we have. So, and maybe I can leave other comments for that conversation. But yeah, I think February was when we watched the vehicle leave premise, and we have no contractual obligations with PAG at this point, and that program is done, as you stated, Lance. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that update, Todd. Anybody have any questions regarding? Go ahead, Jose.
Thanks, Lance. So, am I understanding correctly? ADOT took over and they're actually collecting data for the feds, the IRI data. Is that correct?
They are actually collecting it, and I think it's actually on our next agenda item point there. That's one of our options, is to discuss that ADOT is currently collecting IRI and actually distress data for the region.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if there's any other questions on the sunsetting part, Jose, and then we can answer that on the next agenda item there.
All right, thanks.
Anybody have any questions regarding the sunsetting of City of Tucson's pavement data collection? I see none, so we'll go to item 4, and the first one up is, as required, federal highway state DOTs are responsible for collecting the pavement condition data for the region's federal highway or their FAA federal aid roadways and national highway system roadways. So ADOT has been collecting these. and they make the data available to the regions. So, and to the local jurisdictions. I had invited Robert Bush. I was hoping that he would be here. Oh, Robert is watching it on YouTube. I had invited him because he's overseeing the ADOT pavement management section there, and I was hoping he might be able to talk a little bit about the data that ADOT's collecting. But my understanding is they're collecting not only IRI but all the distress information, and basically they compile it and put it into an overall pavement condition. I don't know if you guys have seen on ADOT's website, they have pavement condition dashboards. I think that's what they're called, but you can actually pull up that information off ADOT's website.
So,
And Robert, I know you just emailed me. If you have some information you want me to share with the group, since you're watching via YouTube, if you want to shoot me something to share.
yeah, and if we can get them in the room, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I know Robert, we had sent you a Zoom link through, I believe Don sent it last week. So if you see that and can join us via Zoom, that would make it a lot easier. So.
Because yeah, I'd like to get some clarity on, what exactly they are collecting. Because I think my understanding is that it may not be the entire federal aid network. It may be limited to National Highway System and interstate facilities. And then I'm not sure if they're doing a sample of the rest of the federal aid network or what exactly they're collecting. So I'd be real curious to hear the specifics on that. And then, just to make sure that everybody understands, and Lance, correct me if I'm wrong, and Todd as well, but my understanding from the historical knowledge of the program is that its intent was not necessarily to fulfill the federal requirements, which were different, obviously, 25 years ago than they are today. The intent was to collect pavement condition data on roadways that were eligible for the use of that federal funding to provide to the jurisdictions so the jurisdictions could manage their pavement assets as effectively as possible. So I want to make sure that we can continue to focus on the original intent of the program. And if we need to shift that to, well, let's just satisfy the federal requirements, certainly we can have that conversation. But if we still want the program to support the asset management, the pavement asset management needs of the local agencies, then we may need to look beyond what the federal requirements are to see if we can apply the federal regional SDBG to collect a more broad set of the federal aid network and possibly even beyond.
No, that's my understanding too, Paul. So, and it looks like Robert was able to join us. So,
yeah, sorry for that. I went to my calendar and all I had there was the invite via YouTube. So that's what I clicked on, thinking that's what I was supposed to do. So I appreciate showing up, everybody. Thank you very much for the time.
Well, we appreciate you being here, Robert, because it sounds like we have a few questions regionally on just what ADOT's collecting. And so if you can kind of give us the lowdown on what ADOT is collecting for the region, that would be great.
Yeah. First of all, it's being collected through International Cybernetics Corporation, or ICC, and they are collecting pavement and photo log data across the entire state highway system, the national highway system, and all HPMS sample panels throughout the region. I can bring up a map if I were to share my screen. I'm not familiar with Zoom, so I'm a little lost.
And I think Jeff can help you share, give you control to share if you'd like to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing Jeff's right now. I can
What was
see
that, Jeff?
Jeff's
Is he able to now?
Yeah, I
you should
see
be
the
able to.
share screen. It said host disabled participants screen sharing. So
Great.
While we have a second here, Robert, just to clarify, so ADOT is collecting all of the ADOT network, which includes the interstate network. And then for the stuff beyond the ADOT network, you're doing a sample set of, I guess, the federal aid network. And that's what we'll hear a little bit more about. Is that right?
yeah, it's specifically the HPMS sample panels.
Yep.
The other thing on the state highway network, we're collecting in both directions of travel, but on the national highway and the HPMS sample panels, we're only collecting in what would be considered the cardinal direction or primary direction, which is from west to east and from south to north. The exception being obviously a one-way road that goes either west or south. We'd obviously have to collect in that direction of travel, but anything else is only collected in one direction of travel going eastbound or northbound.
Okay, Robert, can you try sharing again?
Yeah. Let's see here. I've got. It's wanting to bring up. Okay, I'm hoping this should come up here. You see the Inform login on my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I'm going to go into it here. And I can bring up a GIS map more detailed than this, but this will show you a great deal in general of just what's being collected there in Tucson. And let me get rid of all the camera views. Yeah. Everything highlighted in green, if you can see this, everything highlighted in green is what we're collecting. So we don't collect entire lengths of route. For example, if you can see here, I'm not sure which road this is, but you can see we collect a section of it here and a section of it here. All of these collections are in reference to the HPMS sample panels. I assume all or most of you do know what HPMS is, the Highway Performance Monitoring System.
Yeah, I think most everybody is. Robert, do those sections change from collection to collection, or are they stable for that?
Overall, they're reasonably stable. They can change dependent upon what the HPMS computer, for lack of a better term, spits out for us as sample panels. But what changes, what data changes that causes a change to the sample panels is when a collection of roads significantly change the AADT or perhaps the functional class, because what it's taking is a certain percentage of each type of func class and a region of AADT. If those change significantly, the sample panels may have to change in retrospect to cover a specific percentage of the population of the roads. And as you can see here, we're collecting the entire state network. You see 87, 19, 10, 210, 77. So we're collecting all of that in both directions, but everything else here is singular direction. Any questions?
So your total collection of the federal aid network in the Tucson region, you probably have a fairly consistent set of roadway miles that you're collecting each cycle?
Yeah, as far as in Tucson, it's pretty much the same. As I said, If you just break it down to sample panels, I don't think there was little to no change this year from 2022 to 2023. And I didn't add to it, we are collecting all of this annually.
Gotcha.
That kind of answer your questions, Jose? Anything else you maybe have them zoom in a little bit for any
Yeah,
questions on what they actually are providing?
Well, he jumps around a lot on those panels because the major roads like La Cholla and La Cañada, there's very little information there.
If you go and pan up further north, you just don't know what it looks like up there. Yeah, it looks like Tangerine. Maybe.
Yeah, Robert, in that Oro Valley area there, if you can kind of
Zoom in.
ask the question.
That's our some.
You can see Tangerine Road or Old State
Yeah.
Route 989 is being collected for a certain length of it, but not even the entire section going all the way over to 77.
Yeah,
Missing a lot of information. Yeah.
La Cañada. Well, on the jump, did it go by ADT? Is that why you stopped certain areas? Or
I don't know the specifics on how it's spit out. However, the HPMS black box comes up, it takes all your information and gives you what it wants for sample panels for the year. And not only are we collecting that information as far as the pavement, we're also collecting, the widths and all that other stuff that we have via GIS that we keep track of, shoulders, widths, pavement type, when available to us. Usually, hopefully, if they do, we get the construction plans, if there's any pavement preservation done on the road or any work at all and stuff like that. So it's not just pavement data, but a multitude of data from traffic volume and everything like that, to pavement service type, shoulders, number of lanes. All that information is sent to the feds via the HPMS report.
Todd, you have your hands up?
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Robert, just a couple questions. To what you just said there, all those data points, International Cybernetics is not providing all of those, correct? They're not doing the through lanes, or are they?
What do you mean, collecting the number of through lanes?
And those other HPMS data points, is that
No,
all service?
No, all they're collecting is the pavement data.
Right, okay.
The cracking, the faulting, the IRI, and what am I forgetting? Rutting.
Okay. On I think Lance mentioned this. So on these sample panels or full extent on the state routes, you have all of those, what you just stated as part of the HPMS. International Cybernetics is also providing you an overall condition index number, even on sample panels. Is that true?
What we use for the overall condition is the HPMS guidelines. What eventually breaks down is whether it's good, fair, or poor based on HPMS rules. Furthermore, we break the pavement down into 1/10 of a mile segments. And that's started primarily on the state highway system, but we also apply it to the HPMS panels.
And that's something you or your team's doing, not as a service?
Yeah, we're doing that because HPMS bins are 1/10 of a mile. That's the way the feds like it collected on the state highway system, is everything's broken down to 1/10 of a mile segments. And those numbers we get, it's averaged out. And then for each cracking, faulting, rutting, and all that, you get a score. Those scores combine to give you a final, whether it's good, fair, or poor, based on the HPMS ratings.
That combination, this will be my last one, I guess.
That's okay.
Combination scores to get an overall. Are you stating that formula's in the
HPMS guide? Yeah, let me see if
Okay.
I can
That'd be great.
find
It
it.
sounds like it's also delivered to ADOT. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Todd? Like you're delivered
Well-
an overall score that
Yeah,
says, here's the
I'm-
number and it's good, fair, or poor.
I'm mixing down just from some of our struggles as a program, right? Trying to come up with putting that, what is this pavement in failed condition? Like how did you come up with that? Because things have changed obviously, but in the experience there was the individual distress, like in rutting or percenting, you can say, well, this is kind of the rating, or IRI, for example, you just have 3 tiers, right? Whether it's poor or not, but to bring all that together was always, what question are you trying to answer? What flavors what ingredients do you want in your chili? It was never like, this is how it should be. It was, well, what do you want? And so I guess I was kind of mixing questions there. I was curious, like you say, is some of this data being delivered, or are you doing it in shop, right? ADOT yourself, and also at the same time poking around whether we're plugging things into a formula, or if ADOT with the formulas for getting to that OCI. Thank you.
We actually process the data ourselves. ICC turns it over to us with, in essence, all the processed data, but none of the summaries. Speaking specifically of breaking it down, they give us their scores for each, faulting, rutting, cracking, all that. But we, using ArcMap, take it in and do all the analysis to break it down to the good, fair, poor segments. I'm working in my ArcMap session right now on my other screen to see whether or not I can bring this up successfully for you. Give me a moment here. Let's see, I'm going to try to do a new share. I'm hoping I'm not doubling up. Let's see if this works. Are you seeing my ArcMap screen now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm bringing up, I'm just going to zoom in here, bring this back up, and turn on the route network. And make this larger. Okay, so we can see the segments that were done. And if I highlight one of them, if you notice, all it's clicking on is a bin. I don't know if you can see that. Let me zoom into this specifically here. If you can see it, when I click on it, it's only giving a certain length. It's not flashing the entire length of the route. In that particular section over here on the right, I'm not going to scroll through everything, but you can see there is a ton of variables that get put in. Now, this is taken into account that pavement types that we collect range from AC to concrete to hybrid versions of it. And there's a lot of other information and everything like that. The primary information here, let me find it, is you can see like right here, there's cracking rating was good. IRI rating was fair. The rutting rating was good. And the overall rating is fair. And what that pavement condition dashboard does that Lance was talking about, basically color codes each of the 3 qualifiers, good, fair, poor, into the 1/10 of a mile segments. So you can see visually what's red, which would obviously be poor, green, good, and I think blue or yellow. I don't remember what fair is off the top of my head. But you can see it breaks it down into each of these segments.
So those are the 1/10 of a mile that you mentioned, Robert, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And are there numbers behind the good, fair, poor, IRI, rutting, and cracking?
Yeah, that's taken from, if we go further down in here.
So you can tell like where in the range of good
Yeah,
a certain 1/10 of a mile segment is.
yeah. For instance, also we are getting line width here, but here's, if you notice the data, it's left IRI, right IRI, and average IRI. There is, and I'm not a pavement person, so I apologize not knowing all the specifics on it, but like here's values: AC trans total rate is 30, longitudinal total rate is 10. It takes all these numbers and comes up with a summary, whether it basically breaks it down into each category. Your rutting, your cracking, your IRI, and your faulting each get their own code. And then those numbers are brought together, good, fair, poors are brought together, determine what the overall rating is. Let me see if I have that available. Can you see the B17 on my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you were still seeing my computer. We're having some problems with our OneNote right now, so I'm hoping I can pull it up here. This is just breaking down all the metadata. That's not what I wanted. Calculating, here we go. So here is the breakdown on HPMS. These are the HPMS numbers. What calculate is good, fair, and poor. Take a screenshot of that if you want.
And Robert, do you have that next step where you take the combination of those ratings to the overall?
Yeah, let's see here. That comes down to here where if all three metrics are good, it's good. It depends on how many rating values are being given, but this is how it's broken down. And I'll give you a moment if you want to screenshot that. Also, all the behind the scenes calculations and stuff is explained in this document here. I can probably PDF this document out of OneNote, hopefully if it's working, and send that to Lance, and he can distribute it to everybody that wants to see it. It has the math that's used, how to calculate everything, and then the quick breakdown of what constitutes good, fair, poor for each of the ratings, and then the overall rating.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, Robert, if you want to send that over to me, I'll make sure to get it out to everyone.
Yeah. And it even walks through how we have it set up on a script that we run automatically when we get the deliverables from ICC. So this is pretty detailed throughout the whole thing. It might have a lot of stuff that doesn't interest you, but it should have all the ins and outs of the math and the averages and the specific numbers that we're looking to meet, to which bin to put the data into. Does that help answer a lot of questions for everybody?
Yes. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, Robert, because that's a lot of great information.
Yeah, no problem.
So Robert,
Anybody
can
have
you share
any additional questions
Yes, sir.
for
Go ahead.
Robert?
Yeah.
I'm just seeing if we have any other questions, maybe from our jurisdictions, if there's any other questions or concerns about what ADOT's actually collecting.
I'm curious about the size of the contract and, you know, how much roadway miles you're collecting, just for comparison's sake. The county has been doing periodic collection to get OCI ratings for our entire owned network, federal aid and local roadways. And
Okay.
so we have interest in, you know, seeing if there's economies of scale to partner with ADOT or, you know, figure out what the regional program will look like to handle the federal aid piece of it. So we'd be real curious to hear what your contract scale looks like. And it sounds like the majority of the post-processing is done in-house by ADOT. And you take the numbers aligned with the HPMS rating of good, fair, poor, and from there you're able to figure out what your pavement rehab program looks like for the coming fiscal year. Is that fair?
That's correct. As far as the calculations, ICC gives us all the raw data and the good, fair, poor for each of the metrics, faulting, cracking, rutting, IRI. We go ahead and calculate that number based on the numbers given to us. And then, as I said, secondary wise, then break down whether the entire 1/10 of a mile segment falls into a good, fair, poor category. The length of the contract, by the way, is a 5-year contract. It started last year with ICC. So we'll be planning on collecting through 2026. As I said, it's an annual collection. Overall mileage that they collect varies a little bit. Specifically this year, we added about 1,800 miles or so of collection because we're having them collect the entire state-owned network, which means not just the main lines, but frontage roads, ramps, crossovers, cross-unders, grade separations, virtually everything that ADOT owns. That stuff, what I basically refer to as RFI, ramps, frontage roads, interchanges, isn't required on an annual basis for HPMS, but we like to collect it in about a 3 to 4 year cycle, not only for HPMS purposes, but for our own use for the photo log, so people can keep track and keep up to date on things and stuff like that. So this particular year, they're also collecting that, which takes our total collection somewhere in the neighborhood of about 16,000 linear miles, 15,800, 16,000 linear miles. The price of the contract to do all that with the payment, the photo log, and the GIS deliveries and everything, we're looking at just shy of $1 million annually.
That's super helpful to know. Thanks.
Yeah, the other thing that they do with us, and we're in the process at ADOT, we had them collect last year, and we're trying to gauge the feedback to see if there's enough interest in it, and it's a separate line item in the budget. But we also last year contracted with them to do ground penetrating radar. And what they had done was, not that it's not going to help you guys at all, it was all northern stuff, was I-40 all the way across the state, US 89 from Flagstaff all the way up to the state line, and then I-17 from Phoenix to Flagstaff. And they collected at the network level. They've got actually 3 different levels of collection for ground penetrating radar. They have a network level, which is a single pass at or a little bit below highway speeds. They have a project level, which we did have 2 sections of roadway on I-40 near the California border, and then on I-17 north of the climb out of Sunset Point, if I remember, 2 sections of road done at the project level. And then they also have a design level, which is extremely light. They have to close the whole roadway down and everything like that to do the analysis. But just wanted to let you know, for ICC's purposes, if it was something you're also interested in contracting out for your own data, that they do a darn good job. We're just trying to get that information to bite, because I don't think, at least here in ADOT, it's something that a lot of the pavement people are used to or have been exposed to before, having actual ground penetrating or GPR data to use. So it's a little bit new, and as most of you might know, bringing new data into the fold kind of can meet with a little bit of skepticism too.
Apologies for peppering you with questions, but this is really interesting.
Oh no, that's why I'm here. Lance asked me to come in and join that so you guys could just shoot all of them at me and see what's going on to help Tucson and PAG. You know, certainly don't want, if you guys do contract out services, we certainly don't want to have you guys spending money on redundant collection or anything like that.
Totally. Are you guys doing any signing, striping, retroreflectivity, pavement marking stuff during this collection for the ADOT network, or is that handled separately? Or
it's not planned on. We did do a asset collection with the prior vendor. Long story shortened, the history of what started as the photo log. That's where I came from. I was the photo log. I ran the photo log program, did all the data collection and everything like that for about 15 years with ADOT. Now I've got about 6 years overseeing the collection of it through a contractor. And now I'm the PM on this particular project. The previous vendor, Fugro, did do an asset collection for us based on 2018 data that they collected, and striping, signs, and all of that was collected. The caveat to that was they really didn't know what they were doing. I actually rejected their first 6 submittals on the asset collection because of the quality of the data. It was completely unacceptable. And we did get a final acceptable, if you wish to call it, delivery from them. The only unfortunate thing is, as I said, is as far as on the main lines, the NHS and the sample panels, it was 2018 data. On the ramps, crossovers, frontage roads, all that RFI stuff, that was based on 2017 collection because they did collect it in 17, but not 18. So we didn't get to find the deliverable till 2020. So it was already over 2 years out of date. And as of now, it's in its 4th or 5th year. That's something I can provide any of you that want it. I've got the whole statewide asset collection. Let me show you here what was collected. You still see my ArcMap screen, right?
Yes.
Let me bring it down here and I'll show you here. It went the wrong way. Here we go. So what we collected was, there's a couple in here that are redundant. I broke it all out into a couple because we were having a speed limit problem with going through. Anyway, barriers, which are guardrails, Jersey barriers, highway lighting, linear pavement marking, basically the striping, rumble strips, signs, sound walls, and treatments, which is end treatments for the guardrail, both the leading and the lagging end treatments. We also had it broken out by specific to speed limit signs and advisory signs and stuff like that. The nice thing about it is the data is very thorough, and they did collect a lot of metadata associated with the collection, like, for instance, on signs and stuff like that. If it was a MUTCD related sign, we got the MUTCD code. Lots of times it would provide the text of the sign. For example, we were able to extract out the vast majority of mileposts on the data and run an analysis compared to where we think the mileposts are, you know, as opposed to where they were showing up in 2018 and stuff like that. One of the things also, the linear pavement markings, I found extremely interesting. Let me load it up here real quick. Let me turn off the bins. And let me make sure this is going to show up here.
So while you're doing that, do you guys have a target on what the cycle of other asset data collection would ideally look like from ADOT's perspective? Is it something you would want to get out and collect every 3 years, or do you not quite know that yet?
Well, we don't know that in the sense that I don't know if you're familiar with a program called PECOS. I forget what it stands for, but it's ADOT's backbone to managing all their road maintenance, costs, labor, expenses. Everything is done through PECOS, and ADOT is in a time right now where PECOS is looking to be sunsetted. It's no longer doing the job and everything like that. The problem that we found was that when we had the asset collection done, we didn't go through the next step and say, okay, now that we have this data, how are we going to use it? Because most of our asset data prior to this asset collection was in something called the feature inventory system. And that's a separate, similar to PECOS, it's a very linear, tabular database. And that data does have, does have a lot of information, including coordinates on it. But we found when we did try to do some comparison with the Fugro collection to our existing data, that the coordinates were not nearly as clean. The asset collection from Fugro actually had better collection data as far as the what and where. I wanted to show you this because I think it's real interesting. The white lines I'm gonna make dark gray here since white won't show up on white. And then the yellow lines obviously make yellow here. And if we zoom in, you can see the yellow's not showing up. Let me change that to another so it shows up better on your screen so you can see it. I'm going to just tag it blue just so it'll stand out. So you can see the gray lines. Let me turn off ADIS. So now you see just the striping lines. And if we look at this data, this is just the striping data. It gives us our route ID, which is the ADIS route ID, which is what everybody should be using in the GIS environment throughout the state to identify the road network. If we highlight just these 3 records, this is Glen Street. It gives us our from to measure, whether it's a single or double line, the color of it, and the type being whether it's a solid or solid stripe, meaning one side solid. So this apparently a solid stripe. As it says, it's a 2-way left turn median, whether it's a lane divider serving its purpose and stuff like that. Plus, you can get to this, and let me see if this is still working. You can click on the thing there, and there you go. You can get a picture of the imagery. You can see it's barely there. It definitely is in need of some striping, but you can see a picture of what's going on through it. So that's just the striping data. Overall, their final deliverable, I would give as, in some cases, some of the assets were good, other assets were fair. The sign inventory, for example, I'd probably rate in the high fair range, mid fair range overall. They just had a problem with getting too many signs. For instance, having a left turn sign on an interstate, or having a no U-turn sign on a one-way road or something like that. There was just a lot of discrepancies in the data, stuff that jumped out at me when I would review it. But they did do some good work. I'm not going to fault them entirely. Some of the stuff they did collect here on the Fugro assets. You know, rumble strips, they did a good job with the highway lighting. They did a very good job with the barrier. If anybody's interested, I can also, when I PDF that OneNote of the pavement data analysis, I can also send to Lance our data dictionary on what was collected for the assets, so you can have an idea of what was collected and all the domains on the specific data and everything like that. That may be of use to you. Once again, just reach out to me, let me know. My email address is rbush@azdot.gov. But my purposes here is to help basically give you any and all information and help you with any of the data that ADOT has on hand, especially to eliminate doing the same thing over and over again, or, you know, running the same roads that we're already collecting.
Well, thanks for all that information there, Robert.
Hey, Robert, this is Jose with the Town of Oro Valley. So you say you've been ADOT's been collecting this data for some time now, a couple of years now?
Yeah, all the pavement and photo log data. We in 2017 we started having a vendor collect it. Back in early 2016, the state engineer, who was Dallas Ham at the time, both the photo log collection vehicle and the pavement condition collection vehicle, which for ADOT was two separate vehicles, two separate teams and all that stuff, both vehicles were coming to end of life. And as you know, if you've looked into these vehicles, right now, I think an off-the-shelf turnkey system for everything, you're looking at about $1.5 million just for the vehicle.
Yeah.
You know, and 1 year support perhaps, or whatever it includes and stuff like that. Long story short, Dallas decided, let's contract it out. So in 2017, the contract was issued to Fugro. And since that time, we've had a vendor collected statewide NHS and HPMS sample panel inventory done each year by a vendor.
And this data that you guys collected, you guys have it at obviously it's ADOT's. Do we have access to that data?
You definitely have access on request. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether or not it's made available. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with AZGeo. It's a website that, for lack of a better term, is a clearinghouse for a lot of government and state agencies in Arizona to share their data with. And if it's not there, I can see about getting it. The other thing, let me show you here. For instance, if you can see this, here is our HPMS bin data, calendar year 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. So this is the data that I'm talking about that goes all the way back to 2017. Another thing that we, just as a sidebar without going down a rabbit hole, another thing that we found by doing an analysis from year to year data was we would check the data against known construction plans and SLI treatments such as flush coats, chip seal, microsurface, all that sort of stuff. We would compare that to the data, and we found sometimes we had self-healing pavement. In other words, pavement data that say was rated fair last year, but this year it's rated good, but we can't find any pavement treatment, whether it's a rehabilitation, a mill and fill, or even a flush coat that was done on that particular pavement section to justify how did it get better from 1 year to the other. And we found the problem lies predominantly with these numbers. If you're familiar with pavement data collection, it's a science, it's not perfect. And if you had numbers that were floating between good and fair, as you can see for IRI here, if you had last year a number that was 96, 97, which would put it in a fair category, and this year it dropped down to a 94, 93 just because of the collection of it. You know, the lasers can do only so much, and the automated interpretation of the cracks and everything like that, just those idiosyncrasies of data sitting on the fence between good fair or between fair poor, alternating from year to year. And we found that was a consistent issue with some of the data, especially the data reporting is self-healing. Well, I hope I've answered everybody's questions. If you have any more, feel free to reach out to me. I will PDF this document that you see from OneNote right here and get that to Lance. I'll also dig up our old Fugro asset collection data dictionary on a spreadsheet so you can see all the assets that were collected and what was collected, the metadata associated for all the assets.
Hey, Robert, this data you collect, you report this to FHWA once a year or every 2 years?
It's for HPMS is annually.
It's annually, okay.
Yeah. Consider HPMS is, in essence, the federal report card. Every state has to turn in one every year, and it's a measure of all roads, just not the state-owned roads or anything like that. And as I hope most of you know, a lot of the funding that gets down to the state level comes from these HPMS reports.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have that information since we're actually managing our payments up here.
You know, they combine this with the NBI, the National Bridge data, as well as the HPMS report to help identify where they need to spend the money and break down, you know, the divisions of who gets what.
Performance measures, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the bridges, it's every 2 years. That's the reason I was asking about the payment.
No, we do this annually.
All right, thanks.
So Robert, are you interfacing with any local government agencies up in the Phoenix metro area and providing the sample panel content to them? Are they using it to put together their pavement rehab programs, or is it really just predominantly used for the HPMS reporting requirement? And I'm talking exclusively the non-ADOT facility
data
collection.
To be honest with you, no. I don't know if they're reaching out in another way, but MAG or Maricopa County, I get very little interest in this. Actually, Tucson and specifically PAG have shown a vast greater interest in all this than any other government entity in Arizona. A lot of them just assume, hey, they got what we needed, you know, let's I hate to say this, but we met the minimum qualifications, so why worry about it?
That's kind of where I'm headed. Like, I guess I'm wondering if the sample panel content is able to be used and being put to use to craft a pavement rehab program, or do local agencies need to do a full-scale collection of their network in order to know? And I only know enough to be dangerous here, so that's why
I'm sitting in the same chair. I mean, I know the terms, but maybe I don't know how to use them at times, I think. But I don't know. I haven't had any other MAG MAG, Maricopa County, MPO, anything reach out for this data. Gotcha. You guys, other than other people wanting something or another for a small section, a private company or something like that, as far as a government or COG or MPO, you guys are it that are out here wanting to see this data and how can we use it and how can we integrate it in our plan. You're the only ones doing that.
Because I guess it would be important for us in crafting what the future of our regional program looks like to make a determination. Does the sample panel content only satisfy HPMS, or can it be used at the local agency level to figure out what the distress characteristics are and actually put together a rehab program for part of our network or all of our network, or how might that work? So Todd, I know you've got your hand up. You probably have answers to this kind of stuff.
You know, I think we're all probably thinking it. Jose, myself, you know, yourself, the sample panels there, you might be able to do something for like a rehab program based on the sample sections for the sample sections, but what about all those gaps? Right? What are you going to do? And I think that's where, some of the Tucson provided data, whether it was not used or whatever historically was coming from, was in more recent years, at least, was we were trying to collect full extent, right? It wasn't, here's just the reporting requirement. It was full, all Speedway or Thornydale or whatever road, both directions, in at least curb lane directions, to try to enhance that pavement, from an asset point of view, take that data and determine what the conditions are. Those rating questions that I was asking Robert about, it's because those were challenges we faced. And I think strategy, again, I don't want to go back too much on this, but strategy in the past was we don't want to tell Pima County what's a failed or good road. Your chili, you like your chili how you like it. Here's all the crack data, the rutting data. It was a similar fashion. Provide that full extent, and then interpret as you need to as a local jurisdiction. And happy to assist in those conversations. But these seem to be challenges we never really, as a regional program, overcame. And just looking at some of the ratings that Robert had there, I don't know if those we'd probably have to, Tucson, at least I'll speak from the Tucson side, we'd want to fine tune those a little bit. Those are pretty broad, just 3 categories and pretty broad. I don't know what other factors do we want included in there. Do you want ADT? Do you want, there's just a lot of things. So I think the short answer would be you'd want, if you're trying to use sensor data for your pavement programs, you need a heck of a lot more. So how we go achieving that, I think that's what Lance had on here as part of the agenda discussion, was moving forward on what options we'd have to be able to collect that. But I think full extent is what you need if you go that route. But the federal requirements, that checkbox being met, but so that's good.
Yeah,
that
totally.
checkbox. But what about pavement management at our local level? How do we do that and produce these short range programs, put together priorities, and justify it with data?
So Lance and Dave Mitchell, I'm wondering if you guys can pull the total mileage for the federal aid network at some point. It doesn't have to happen like on the fly or anything like that, but just to maybe give us a scale of, and Todd, you may have these numbers kind of available through the history of data collection. Like, how much mileage are we talking about in order to cover the whole federal aid network for the region?
Don't quote me on this, but the federal network we collected for the region, and I think we missed some of what's defined as Indian routes, and you could call it 3,000 ballpark, I think it was, so a little over 3,000 centerline miles. Actually, yeah, don't quote me on that. We were I think we were collecting, just to kind of put that to scale, about 1,500 miles worth of data in a data, and that was kind of half the cycle, although we doubled up national highway system routes we collected every year, but then we were trying to do those other federal aid eligible roadways in half per year biannually. So, but that was never getting to local streets. All those that happen to land on a functional map somehow, because there were some oddballs. I don't know.
But was that cycle in part due to the HPMS requirements initially, or like, I know that Pima County is kind of now on a 3-year cycle is kind of what we're dealing with. So we did just do another collection in the fall of all county-owned roadways, and so, if we're looking at a regional program that covers the federal aid network, roughly 3,000 miles every 3 years, it's well short of a 16,000 mile collection that Robert is issuing in a statewide fashion. So it sounds like it could be a manageable thing that we could figure out how all of that fits together. And then, of course, comes in the question of the local agencies' opportunities to add on to that and say, can we get local roadway content if we pitch in funding or we find additional funding or however that business model needs to look? It sounds achievable, at least just from, a quick glance.
Yeah. So where came from, sorry, was it that strategy, I guess I'll call it that collection strategy coming from was really, the HPMS requirements was kind of in the background there, that if the state didn't fulfill it, or, quite honestly, when they first started doing this, and I think Robert said 2017, there actually weren't even aware, we found out trying to feed data up to the state, was if that went away, we would still be to backfill that collection cycle. And how I understood that was like, I'll just hopefully not be repetitive, but the National Highway System stuff, you had to report there. The rest of those federal aid was at every 2-year cycle. So that's kind of where that came. We were still trying to follow those guidelines. Now we were going overbound in terms of we were doing more than sample sections, but the cycle was trying to fulfill that. And I'll just throw this in because I don't know if there'll be enough time, but I would think ideally as a regional, it'd be some opportunity to just expand or ride on the state contract with obviously implementing the funds to collect the regional stuff to where we have common platform, common language, as their contractor changes their data set, looks like our data set as local jurisdictions, to collect, just expand. So it's duplication, but expand on those, filling those gaps. If there's opportunity to do that, I would think that would be the most ideal route. And how much of that you do obviously depends on funding. If it's just the federal aid gaps, it's federal aid gaps. But from what I've seen with Marana and the county there, you went out and you wanted all your local streets. Whether that's achievable is maybe different, but if there was some line item option to, if county is up, that you still are able to just leverage the same contract in here, I think that would be ideal. I'll shut up.
That's in our agenda coming up. So if we're done with questions for Robert, we can go to the next couple bullet points here, because I know we're starting to get close on time. So any other questions for Robert? And I appreciate all the information, Robert.
Yeah, I do have one correction. I kept saying HPMS on the guidelines for good, fair, poor and everything. It's actually MAP 21. And no, I don't know a lot about MAP 21, but that's what it's based on, which supports the HPMS information.
And that's, Todd, I saw you had a thumbs up on that. So I don't know MAP 21. I don't know if the group, if you can clarify what that is, Todd, for the group, or if everybody knows that.
Thumbs up just for the clarification. Oh, sorry, Jose, go ahead.
Go ahead, Todd.
Oh, that was it. I was saying clarification because I wasn't familiar with seeing those ratings in the HPMS documents. So that's what that thumbs up was for, Lance.
Okay.
I could offer some insight. MAP 21 was legislature brought out in the early 2010, 2015 time period. It preempted the FAST Act legislature. So the MAP 21 created the framework and the desire for a performance-based system. It did establish some parameters. Those were ironed out and specifically laid out in terms of performance measures and criteria collection. That's kind of why in 2017, 2018, the state transitioned into their current data collection part, because that's when the FAST Act requirements kicked in. So it's all federal legislature at a high end. It's a lot of it is transportation driven. There's a lot of congestion, air quality components in it, but the three main categories of there's 7 category go areas of it. And infrastructure is one major component of it. And what Robert's pointing to is the federal guidance and ruling onto what's to be collected by the states and how they're putting a uniform criteria for nationwide evaluation. So that's kind of how it's all packaged. They have performance measures, dashboards, and other stuff on their website, the federal highways, that is. By examining that, you kind of see how all the data collection practices are feeding into the way that they are doing their national reporting. So that's kind of the basis of it.
David, does ADA report the overall condition or like the average for the whole entire state?
They do by feeding it into the HPMS. That is a data system that's their way of reporting it. Now, there are maybe different ways of reporting out, such as in the long range transportation plans and any STIP documents, but those are more of updating either the achievement towards the established targets or communicating out the current conditions of those performance areas.
So real fast, before we move on, Lance, if we can maybe, just put a bug in Robert's ear, if there's a way for us to get the, I don't know if it would be the shape files for the non-ADOT owned federal aid network in Tucson that's covered from the sample panels. That way we can kind of get a sense of what that gap fill would look like in terms of mileage. And then that might give us a better idea of what the scale of adding to ADOT's contract might be, or trying to, patch those two collections together in terms of what's needed. That might be a good next step for us to understand the scale and scope of what's needed to collect the entirety of the federal aid network.
And Paul, I think we started that process. So I know what Todd, you said, 3,000 centerline miles. And I think what we were looking at was basically to fill in the gap with ADOT was about 1,500 centerline miles.
Also, so just to let you know, on the deliverable, we can provide whatever you want, but we'll just give you the whole data set. That way you can carve it up and do it as you please. And what I mean by that is literally everything that's collected statewide, SHS, NHS, and sample panels. So you can do with it as you please, however you please.
Gotcha. Great.
Todd, your hand's up. Do you have a question or?
Sorry about that. I think I forgot to lower it.
Well, thanks again, Robert. I appreciate all that information. I know as a region, we really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm in the process of just sending that email to you with both the PDF, breaking down that OneNote, showing how we get the numbers and everything like that, so you can share with everybody. I also included an Excel spreadsheet of our data dictionary for those asset collections, and hopefully you can forward that email to everybody, Lance, and I'm available for any follow-up, anything you need. Let me know and reach out and we'll get it to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
We just have a couple other bullet points that are kind of fall under the options for us to kind of consider on the agenda. So I just kind of want to get to those. The second option that we have beyond, relying on ADOT solely to do the collection would be for Todd to purchase another van. So, I know, but but no, for us as a region to purchase another collection van and a local jurisdiction to kind of take over that sampling for the region. And I think Robert even mentioned we were looking at 1.5 million for just the vehicle. So we would have a region, we would have to get the funds through the regional council, and would require, like it says, a local jurisdiction to take the lead on the collection, like the city of Tucson had done in the past. So I don't know if there's any thoughts or anybody wants to step up and say, hey, that sounds like a great idea, or anybody say it's not a great idea. Go ahead, Todd. I can see your.
I think generally it's not a business model that people are interested in. It doesn't seem sustainable. We've all kind of, even ADOT has migrated to data as a service. Like, I think we need to be looking in that arena.
And I was just going to say the same thing. before anybody, I would recommend against, like you say, look at our experience locally, regionally here, and then ADOT, what Paul just said. it's I recommend against it, but hey, more power to you if you think you can manage.
No, I appreciate that. And City of Tucson has a lot of experience over the years of just what that looks like. So that takes us to the next bullet point, which is kind of where we've been going with potentially contracting out for the additional pavement data collection that, to supplement what ADOT's collecting. So we provide data similar to what the City of Tucson had provided in the past. But what we'd be working with is to supplement what ADOT collects so that we're not duplicating collection, working with Robert and what their sample panels are and doing the other sections that aren't currently being collected by ADOT. We'd be looking at a 2 to 3 year cycle, though, not every year like ADOT is kind of what we were thinking on those sections. The data would be made available in Cartograph or Street Saver. I know there's some different platforms that are being utilized, so that's something that we would look at meeting the different platforms for the region. The formats like the OCI, the PCI condition. And along that line, we'd also, with our contractor, the local jurisdictions would have the ability, like we kind of briefly talked about earlier, is to pick some additional items that they wanted done, funded solely by those jurisdictions. If you wanted to do asset inventory or your local roadways, that would be something that could be made available through this contract as well. It's that's another option of what we were looking at. So I know we kind of talked about it while Robert was giving us an update, but any thoughts or ideas or discussion on that?
I like that option. We're just getting a vendor to actually collect the data for us for the region. And we are collecting data, payment data every 3 years, so that works with us.
Great.
On you were talking every 3 years. Could it not be there's data every year? It just rotates. Every 3 years you get a full data set, but you're not necessarily collecting the same road. I don't know if that would be something to where it's a constant flow of data annually where the money's being expended, or are you suggesting, Lance, that there would be a spend every 3 years, nothing in between?
Well, and that's something we're looking at regionally. So, and I can't remember who had mentioned that somebody had mentioned that they were, was it you got Paul, Pima County collecting every 2 to 3 years on?
That's
so,
right.
I mean,
For 3
what
years.
we realize is there's not going to be a whole lot of change in the payment condition. But I mean, we're open to look at what we need to provide to meet, to mesh with what ADOT's providing, but we don't see the value, and it's something that we're discussing. So, I mean, we're open. We want to discuss with you guys what you're looking for, but we're looking at every 2 to 3 years collecting and meshing in with ADOT what they collect. I don't know what that looks like, Todd, as far as if we're only going to collect every, or if we provide something each year. I don't think we've really thought that portion out yet.
Yeah, I guess it just kind of depends on what works best. Like, I know that traffic counts, for example, are annual, but they're annual so that no traffic count is older than 3 years old, right? So for the major streets and routes, and that's kind of the way that program's been fashioned. But ortho photos, on the other hand, are, every few years you commission a flight and you get ortho data with your partners pitching in, and it might be more akin or more suited for that kind of model if local agencies are going to be contributing to collect, local roadway data and other pieces. I mean, it's just worth exploring to see what the best fit is.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess I would, just advocate for, as far as collection of data on the federal aid network, I would want to make sure that we're looking at whatever is eligible for collection with the fund source that we're talking about. So I think there's federal STBG funds. So if this pavement program should be more of a regional asset management program, then we should probably have those conversations, especially if the funding is eligible for asset inventory beyond just the pavement condition and the needs are there. I think we should take a look at that opportunity while we're out there collecting data, especially if the funding allows for it. And then the stuff off the federal aid network, which I think the STBG cannot be used for, that's where the local contribution would say, hey, we want all our local roads collected and here's our county HERF or whatever fund source, and then just commission the collection as one big batch.
And my understanding is that asset inventory isn't eligible, but that's something we can look at and discuss further. And Michelle, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Just, kind of spitballing. One of the things that I would have concerns with splitting it up and kind of divvying out a portion each year is we do the worst first is our category. And it's nice to have the data collection all at one time. So we're kind of resetting versus having some things aged by the system versus actual data mixed together. That way everything kind of gets a reset every 3 years. So we're working with when we compare them, we're comparing like for like, if that makes sense. I think we could work with whatever we have available, but there is some benefit to having that all at one time data collection.
Yeah,
This is Dave at PAG. I'm sorry, Lance, but I would concur for PAG's performance measures reporting requirements. It's better to have a specific year of data set than to have it drag out and have to use averages or to come up with some way of representing that data and keeping track of it. It's hard to forecast and really know if your data is kind of diluted, if you would.
no, thanks, David. And I know we had a few people drop off the meeting, but it sounds like the general consensus is to kind of move forward looking at contracting supplemental pavement data collection. Is that the gist of what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, within that, look at the options for whether it's becomes a pass-through to ADOT to contract or whether it makes sense for one of us to do that. I don't know that I want to volunteer us necessarily, but like there are local agencies that are contracting the data acquisition right now. So does it make sense for one of them to do that and then share through PAG, or I don't really know, but probably worth a discussion.
Pima County is collecting data from a vendor. Is that the same vendor from Marana? Do you know?
I don't know who Marana is using. Michelle, do you happen to know whether Marana and us are sharing the same vendor for the pavement collection?
I don't know who Marana is using. We are using RAS for this latest data collection, and I believe they were doing other work in the area. So it is possible. I believe they were also doing work for ADOT as well.
Hey, Michelle, how's the RAS doing for you guys? How are they performing?
They did a really good job. We had a lot of good detailed QC on it. They were able to walk us through and explain things very thoroughly. I think we have a better data set than what we had 3 years ago. There's been some improvement in technology, and so they can differentiate better between longitudinal and transverse cracking versus block cracking versus alligator, where some of that nuance, I don't think the sensors and things were at that point to be able to pick up some of that. So I think we're overall getting better information.
Is this the first time they're doing data for you, or is this like the second round, second cycle?
This is our first round with RAS.
Thanks.
Robert, you had your hand up. Did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know our contract, because we did reach out when PAG was interested to know whether or not they could piggyback our contract. Unfortunately, they can't. The state decided they didn't want to allow any IGAs or anything like that because of the potential of confusing all the data or getting to become second and stuff like that. It's each person gets their each contract. Now, if PAG or Tucson or any government agency wanted to reach out to ICC and perhaps piggyback their existence already here in Arizona to get lower costs on the startup and all that stuff that's associated, you might benefit from it. I don't know if anybody has made those contacts to ICC or not, but they do have 2 vans already in Arizona for the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how fast they wrap it up. I just
Yeah,
wanted
and
to
actually, I've been speaking with both ICC and RAS, so
Yeah.
kind of talked to both of them about their services. So great. Any other discussion? I think we've kind of reached all of our agenda items, and we have like 1 minute left on our scheduled meeting time. So
When's our next meeting, Lance?
that's a good question. What would you guys like me to set up? How far out? I'm like I said, we've been looking. We were trying to piggyback on ADOT's contract to see if the consensus was for us to kind of mesh with ADOT, and that was kind of not well, like Robert said, the ADOT contract doesn't allow for co-op. So I started putting together an RFP to go out if we wanted to, advertise for ourselves regionally. But I know this task force used to meet quarterly, I think, but given the fact that we're looking to try to narrow down and move forward on some regional pavement connection, you guys want on June or July? What would you like me to try to set up for us?
For me, the sooner the better. Next month will work for us, but I don't know about the rest of the region.
You guys want me to look for a date in June then?
Yeah, I think the sooner the better. Let's keep the conversation going so it doesn't, go stale or whatever. That would be really helpful.
And hopefully we can get, Marana, Sarita, and, Jason was here and had to leave, but, Tohono O'odham as well to get more of the region in. So I will look for a date in June and we'll get something on the books.
And then, I'd be curious to hear either from Robert or other, if we're looking at a 3-year collection cycle, 1,500 miles, what kind of ballpark costs are we expecting? Because I think the old program was running at $450,000 a year of STBG. Not to say that all of that was utilized by the city staff and the van run and all that stuff, but there may be some good cost savings opportunities by just doing it on a 3-year cycle and going and getting the data and delivering it to the jurisdictions. There may be some good results there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I appreciate you guys all your time and I appreciate you being here. So look forward to getting together next month, and I'll email out all that information that Robert's emailed me to the group, and we'll go from there.
Great.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to see you.
Well, Lance, thanks.
Take care.